Welcome back to our series on the law of subsidy. By the time I'm done with this series, I hope you understand that the law of subsidy is a universal law, particularly as related to government. You will also begin to learn that the issue is not that subsidies create problems, it's that the incentives in government prevent policing the problems. So let's go forward now to our second subject, which is the obsession with higher education. And all of you have heard all of these politicians going on and on about how everybody ought to be able to go to college and how everybody needs a college education and Bernie Sanders would make it free for everybody. You get the picture. We have a whole lot of politicians trying to buy votes by way of giving away free college education. And of course, they're throwing in there a little bit about the student loan problems. So you've got a lot of stuff going on here. And let's take a look at what's really happening and let's look at the history of it. And I'm going to start in my family. My grandmother was a school teacher and she got her teaching certificate. Notice she did not get a BS in education. She got a teaching certificate at Walla Walla College in Eastern Washington State. Now, that's a private church-operated college. It's where she went to school, and I don't know how much she paid for it, but it wasn't a whole lot. My grandfather and grandmother were never very well off. They were not at risk for not having a roof over their heads and not at risk for not having food on the table and clothes on their back. And I remember visiting their home in Central Oregon as a little kid thinking it was wonderful. But at the same time, my mother had an electric stove. My grandfather taught me how to cut kindling for the wood stove that grandma cooked on, baked in, and heated up the irons to iron our clothes on. And I thought it was wonderful. It was no big deal. They weren't well off, but they managed to do everything without a lot of money. That's the way it was. Well, let's go on further now. That's somewhere in the early part of the 20th century. Now, my dad went to the same college right after World War II. And by the time he got to college, he had two boys, a year apart, my two oldest brothers. And so you got mom, dad, and two kids, and dad's going to school. Now, the GI Bill took care of his tuition, which in 2019 dollars would run about $4,300. But they still had to live. Dad set up a radio repair shop. Mom took in other kids to look after, and they came out with no debts. Mom and dad moved into the Seattle area, and dad took up a profession where his physics degree was useful. Now, mom and dad were never flush with cash, but we got by. We didn't know we were poor. We joked about how the rich person was one who had $1 more than I did. But we never lacked for anything. We always had clothes, we always had food, we always had a roof over our head, and dad helped my two oldest brothers as they went to college. And they went in the 60s to the same private church-operated college in Eastern Washington, Walla Walla College. And I went back and looked up the numbers. When they went, annual tuition was about $5,800 a year. Now, that's constant 2019 dollars. Then we compare that to dad's tuition of 4,300. So 43 to 5,800, we've seen about 25% increase. It's going up, but it's not huge. When I went to college at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, after we moved to Alabama, My tuition in 2019 dollars was about $3,800. So the difference here between private and state schools is real. And that $3,800 was only like $100 different from what the University of Pennsylvania charged and so on. So we'd seen some growth in the cost of education, but nothing huge. So the question is, why was there this growth in the cost of education? And if we look at it, the rush of prosperity that was in the roaring 20s before the Great Depression led to an increase in the number of people going to college. But by the time we got to World War II, we had roughly 5%, that's 1 in 20, who had gone to college, gotten a college degree. College degrees were necessary for very specific things. You want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, perhaps a teacher, a researcher, things that really involve the higher education. But you want to be a mechanic? Why do you need to go to college? You learn from other mechanics. Nowadays, with cars a little more complicated, you might spend a year in a technical school learning how to do that. You might take some special classes. I have a friend who's a motorcycle mechanic. What did he do? He took special classes related to the brand of motorcycles that he works on. He doesn't have a college degree. He's building a business and he's doing reasonably well. I don't want my car mechanic to have a piece of sheepskin on the wall. I want him to either know how to handle sheet metal in case I've had one of those sheet metal salad events, or who is in tune with my engine to make sure that it runs right. I don't care if he's got a degree, and frankly, a degree which includes all those general education requirements of psychology and English literature and composition and all that stuff, doesn't do a thing for what he's doing. It's worthless. There was a little bit of a push. 5% in college before the war. After World War II, with the GI Bill, we wanted to give back to our veterans. The number of people who graduated from college went up to around 8%. That's still less than 1 in 10. Not universal in the Bernie Sanders mold. So what happens? You have the GI Bill. Then in 1958, the federal government starts promoting college loans for non-veterans with the National Defense Education Act. And colleges said, money, 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 show me the money. Oh, you showed me the money. Let me figure out how I can get a piece of it. And suddenly they started offering more classes in more subjects. And in 1950, we had 430,000 graduates, roughly. By 1970, that number roughly doubled to 840,000 graduates per year. And that's right at the time when we landed on the moon. Remember, that's 1969. Because the number of veterans available to take up loans is fairly fixed. I mean, we have a small number go in the military every year, a small number come out who would be eligible. Colleges are looking at this going, how can we get bigger? How can we make more money? Remember, subsidies are about profit. For a politician, the profit is, I did something to fix a problem, that'll make you want to vote for me. That's his profit. He wants power. In 1965, Senator Claiborne Pell of Rhode Island sponsored the Higher Education Act. Now, this had part and parcel of Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty. And it sought out students with bad finances. It wanted the poor kids to go to college. To quote Joe Biden, I think he said, poor kids are just as smart as white kids. Yeah. They wanted to make sure the poor kids went to college. It didn't matter whether they were qualified or not. There are rich kids that aren't qualified. There are poor kids that aren't qualified. They wanted to get poor kids in college. If you can buy the votes of poor people, why not do it? So this program got revised in 1968 and 1972, and it's not about education, it's about social engineering. And they were pushed into identifying and recruiting students of exceptional financial need. This is a direct taxpayer subsidy of colleges. And remember what's going to happen when you subsidize something. You're going to get more of it, and it's going to get more expensive. In 1972, the debate revolves around how do you figure out who's going to get the money? Colleges wanted the money directly. Give me the money, give me the money, show me the money. And Congress said, maybe there's a better way. So what they did was said, we will subsidize the students. Now, remember that the money's going to the colleges. They just moved it back one notch to make it look better. And this allegedly gave the students wider opportunity. It allowed the students to go more places. More colleges could get the money. Money, 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 money. And like Topsy, it rode. They were figuring out how to milk the cash cow. And you see, this was a fiction. The idea was that the legislators were helping the students, when in fact they weren't helping students at all. They were helping the colleges. And, you know, the idea was college educated people make higher salaries. Well, to some degree that's true, or it used to be when a limited number of people were going to college. The reason then was that people who were going to college needed it for science, technology, engineering, mathematics, medicine, those big, high-paying fields. Those people needed to go to college, and they made more money. But when you graduate an English teacher or a sociologist, do they make more money? No. Do you graduate somebody who has a degree in general studies and they do better? Or a football player who got a scholarship and took classes in underwater basket weaving, does he do better? Especially if he is not one of those who gets picked in the NFL draft? Chances are he does worse, not better. But what you end up with now, remember Claiborne Pell had the grants, and we also, through the Higher Education Act, had the federally insured student loans. The idea was student got the loan. If he didn't pay it back, the government made sure that the banks that loaned it didn't lose money. Oh, so there's a subsidy to the banks too. The law of supply and demand says that when the supply goes up, you're going to have demand come to match it. So when we supplied all of this money for more education, you're going to find more education to come get it. Now, let me be careful here. It wasn't education chasing the money. It was schooling chasing the money. There is a very big difference. Most education actually comes from the College of Hard Knocks. Schooling comes when you get in the four walls with a professor. And we know that many of those professors don't teach you anything worthwhile. Now, when students have more money to pay for school, colleges are going to figure out ways to get some of that money. And we're going to take a minute here and pause and say, oh, if education in those STEM fields isn't enough to soak up all the money that's available, what am I going to spend that money on? Well, the professors are going to ask for more teaching assistants. They're going to ask for fancier labs. They're going to say, I've got this PhD. I only want to teach the upper division classes. So you go find yourself somebody with a master's degree who can teach that lower level calculus course. And by the way, when I went to college, my introductory calculus course was taught by a guy with a master's degree. He happened to be very good, but the fact is, he didn't have a PhD. So you start hiring more people to do the same job. Then you say, well, I want a bigger amphitheater. The amphitheater I took my biochemistry class in would hold close to 300 people. Now you know that Dr. Haupt did not grade papers on 300 people. He had TAs to help him. And so when you look at it, yes, he did the lectures, but how many other lectures out there were done by somebody with, shall we say, lesser qualifications? I'll give you one example. One of the inorganic chemistry classes was taught by my sister. That is, the chemistry lab was taught by my sister. And for some reason or other, one time she happened to get sick or had to be away from, couldn't do it. I was a sophomore in college. I taught the inorganic chemistry lab that day. No, the professor didn't come down and take care of it. I taught the lab that day. That tells you what's going on. The quality of what's going on is determined by the quantity of money available. More money means lower quality, means you get more of it, but the quality can go down. And so you end up with some very interesting things. But when you look at what people are actually saying, you have to ask questions. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which is supposedly nonpartisan, says, quote, that by expanding college access, Pell Grants help narrow the post-secondary achievement gap between low and moderate income students. At least that's the theory. And those of greater means. They boost college enrollment. Well, that's true, they do. Is it necessary? Different question. Reduce dropout rates. Yeah, if you drop out because, if the class was hard, but you still got money to buy a lesser class, you might stay. And take more courses. Yeah, I got money to take more classes. They also help accelerate graduation and improve college completion rates. Notice what it says, college completion rates. Not education, not employability, college completion rates. In general, colleges don't raise tuition on the assumption that Pell Grants will cushion the blow. No. You guys are a bunch of idiots. Colleges raise tuition because they know there's plenty of money there to get. Now, some schools don't have a big problem. Ivy League schools, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, etc., out on the West Coast, Stanford, they all have a big name. UCLA is even there. And so they always have plenty of students who want to come in and be part of that student body because of the name school. Now, when we look at things, we have to ask, what else are schools doing in order to make sure they get a piece of that pie? How about we put in a lazy river and beach club for recreation? That's the University of Missouri at Columbia. There are famous works of art that can be loaned to dorm rooms at Oberlin College. Nearby me, where my grandson actually went, there is a fabulously appointed fitness center at the University of Central Florida. Rutgers University has a ropes challenge course, Olympic pool with a diving power, an 80-foot climbing wall, and a roller hockey rink. What does any of that have to do with education? It may have everything to do with schooling, getting students in. It's got nothing to do with education. And none of that leads to anything about employability. But every piece of that has something to do with recruiting. We can polish the brass a little bit. The place looks good. Oh, it is so good. Look at the things we've got for you. You have a bidding war that escalates, and then tuition escalates faster, and the result is predictable. That same outfit, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, notes that despite their proven success, Pell Grants now cover a small and shrinking share of college costs for students who receive them. They now cover just 29% of average cost of tuition, fees, and so on. In 75, it was 79%. Oh, why would that be? Could it be all of that money that's not being spent on education, but it's being spent on fluff? But oh my God, we've got to get all of these students to college. No, we don't. But remember, where's the money coming from? It's coming from Uncle Sugar. It's not coming from parents. It's not coming from the students. It's coming from Uncle Sugar. If tuition goes up, well, we'll just liberalize student loans. We'll liberalize Pell Grants. We'll make all of these more and more because tuition's gone up. We've got to do something. We got to help out those poor students so the college can offer more amenities, or as others have pointed out, it is an arms race on amenities. When we look at this all through the law of subsidy, the result is entirely predictable. When you create a pot of gold, hungry college administrators will figure out how to be the leprechaun. Remember, he's the guy guarding the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's as certain as the sun rising in the east. When you subsidize something, you get more of it, and it gets more expensive. In the second part, we're going to talk a little bit more about the numbers.
Until next time, take a look at those links below. Join me on MeWe or on Parlay, the new non-censoring, non-tracking versions of Facebook and Twitter. But if you must use the old left-wing censoring versions, we're still on Facebook and at VidZet on Twitter. The message is what matters. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for watching.